Now let's talk about what conflict and violence can lead to: human suffering and displacement. We saw it in 2022. More than 71 million people were forced to leave their homes. That's the highest ever in 1 year. These are internally displaced people, refugees in their own countries.
This year's global report on internal displacement is painting a rather bleak picture of the world, since we're reporting the highest number ever of internally displaced people globally. This is roughly double the number that we were recording 10 years ago, and it's a 20% increase on last year.
71 million people forced to leave their homes but not flee their countries. What explains this high number of internal refugees? The war in Ukraine and climate change. These were the two biggest factors.
Much of the increase is caused, of course, by the war in Ukraine, but also by floods in Pakistan, by new and ongoing conflicts across the world, and by a number of sudden and slow onset disasters that we've seen from the Americas all the way to the Pacific.
Climate change is hurting the whole world, but in 2022, the worst affected was Pakistan. It suffered a brutal monsoon last year. There were massive floods. They displaced about 8 million Pakistanis. Many returned home when the floods abated, but more than 1 million couldn't go back even by the end of the year, last year. And this is a conservative estimate. It's extremely difficult to collect information about internally displaced people, so this report does not show the full picture. It talks about displacements due to conflict. That's where Ukraine tops the list. Over the last year, almost 17 million Ukrainians had to leave their homes. As the war spread from one city to another, people moved to relatively safer zones. Russia's initial offensive was rebuffed in Kiev. Fighting in the capital ended by April 2022. So people could return home here. But that's not the case in cities like Bakhmut. It's been the worst and the longest battle in this war. It has seen near constant warfare. The city is in ruins, and the people of Bakhmut don't have a home to return to. At the end of 2022, about 6 million people remain displaced in Ukraine, the second highest in the world after Syria. This is the list of 10 countries with the most internal refugees due to conflict. Most of them feature regularly in this list, like Afghanistan. Last year, more than 32,000 people were displaced due to violence in Afghanistan. More than 4 million Afghans displaced earlier have not been able to return home. And it's not just conflict that is plaguing this country, it's climate change too. Multiple natural disasters struck Afghanistan last year. There were heavy floods in May, an earthquake in June. Almost 250,000 Afghans were displaced. More than 2 million cannot go home due to climate disasters. The total number of Afghans who become refugees in their own country is 6.5 million. And this does not include the people who fled the Taliban regime, who've left Afghanistan. Across the border in Pakistan, things are hardly better. Like I said, 8 million people were displaced due to the monsoon last year. Agricultural land was submerged, cities were inundated, people survived in makeshift camps, waiting for the waters to recede. Disease and hunger crippled the population. Pakistan is still reeling under the economic impact of the floods, and now it's setting itself on fire over politics. Conflict in Pakistan is not ending anytime soon, and climate change is far from being reversed. So this year is not expected to be better. It's a grim situation, the world over, in fact. People, often the most poor and marginalized, are being forced from their homes. This year's conflict in Sudan is sure to drive up the numbers further. There's not much we can do except hope that conflicts end and climate action becomes more urgent. Until that happens, the refugee numbers will keep rising. And it won't just be a humanitarian problem anymore. It will be an economic, political, and social problem. And as of today, world leaders aren't even talking about addressing it.